There once was a certain young man who was traveling down a long road between two cities. He was young, handsome, ambitious, and a good church boy. He had not a fear or care in the world as he traveled down on his merry way. But his thoughts soon turned from his home and his family to his present safety when he went around the bend and he was being jumped by bandits. As they beat him down, they stole his hopes, his dreams, in addition to his clothes and all his money. He knew that he could die there on the side of the road, alone, disfigured, and helpless. He knew that no one could maybe find him until it was too late and he was gone. He had no choice but to hope, pray, and wait. But through his disfigured ears and throbbing headaches, he was able to hear on the very road he had just been traveling on footsteps. There were the footsteps of a priest. Surely a priest would help a poor young man who had been beaten down and fallen into a ditch. But to the young man's dismay, instead of helping him, the priest crossed to the other side of the street, his Bible open, and his head full of theological thoughts, and his to-do list for the day. The young man's spirits fell, but then he once again was able to hear footsteps on the road. They were the footsteps of a Levite. Surely a Levite would help a poor young man beaten down into a ditch. But to the young man's dismay once again, the Levite crossed to the other side of the road, careful to avoid the danger which had recently overtaken the young man. Not a shard of hope was left in the young man, and he resigned himself to his seemingly inevitable fate. But he heard a third set of footsteps on the road. They weren't the well-refined steps of a well-educated man, or the graceful gait of a man of culture. It was the slow shuffle of a commoner returning home from his day's work. If a priest and a Levite wouldn't help him, how could he expect a layperson to? But the footsteps stopped. Now we're all familiar with the story, which I just told you in a briefly edited version of, from the book of Luke. And we're all very familiar with the verses that precede it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We may even find this story to be current to our modern world and be frustrated by the behavior of the priest and the Levite. Christians shouldn't behave that way, we say to ourselves as we listen to the story. And we are correct. Christians should not behave that way. Like each and every day, without even realizing it, we may find ourselves walking past those who are stuck in the dishes of our modern world. Without even realizing it, we can be neglecting them and not seeing their needs. Now, we maybe don't stop because we're afraid, like the Levite, that we might get hurt too, like the people who are stuck in these modern day dishes. Maybe we're just too busy. We've got too much to do stuff at home. And maybe we just don't care. But while we may not intend it, there's a whole population that is stuck in one of these modern day dishes, praying for someone to stop and help, that we are walking right past. Now, homelessness is defined as the state of living in which someone is unable to provide for himself food, shelter, clothing, and the other necessities of life. Within this definition, there are 5 distinct causes that can lead to this way of life. And they are as follows: abuse, addiction, tragedy, neglect, and poor reintroduction. The abused person has come into a state of homelessness as a result of being hurt by someone else. Perhaps he was physically abused as a child, or perhaps he was running from such abuse as a young person or adult. Addiction is a large component of homelessness for many people. A large portion of the homeless population is in this state because of an addiction past or present to drugs, alcohol, or some other substance. Tragedy is a cause that affects more families than necessarily individuals, so it can affect individuals also. A natural disaster destroying a person's property, a sudden foreclosure on a home, sudden death in the family, or any other sort of tragedy can lead to a family or individual ending up on the street without being able to provide for themselves, and distinguish them from a normal lifestyle. Neglect is seen in the homeless population in many children and also in the physically disabled and mentally retarded. A large portion of the homeless population is either physically or mentally disabled and are therefore unable to take care of themselves and end up on the street. The final group or cause of homelessness is actually more of a sub-cause, so that it is a poor reintroduction. Those who are poorly reintroduced can end up being homeless because of coming back from an abnormal lifestyle and having to be reintroduced to the normal way of life without proper help. Two groups that generally have this happen to them are people who have recently gotten out of prison and have been unable to be acquainted with how to lead a normal life and consequently fall into homelessness, and also war veterans. These are not usually people who have just recently gotten back from the war, but people who maybe have come back from a long time ago and suffered from things such as post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, and these two disorders maybe even led them to an addiction which has contributed to their ending up on the street. Now, within these 5 different causes of homelessness, there are also 2 distinct levels of homelessness. Those people on both levels are still considered homeless and are still in dire need of help, but they have slightly different circumstances. The first level of homelessness is that of the unsheltered and unaccompanied. The people in this sort of homelessness are generally the kind of people we think of when we hear homeless person or hobo. They live on the streets and sleep on the sidewalks or in parks and generally panhandle or have really no way of making a life for themselves. They possibly have no possessions whatsoever, or what possessions they do have, they have to always have on their person so that they are not stolen from them or lost. While all of the different contributors to homelessness that I just told you about can lead to this living in this level, the 3 that I think are the most common are those who have been abused, those who have fallen because of those who have been addicted, those who have been neglected, and those who are poorly reintroduced. The addicts can end up in this situation because, obviously, his addiction to particularly drugs or alcohol has altered his brain chemistry and has driven him from reason to madness. It is very hard for him to come out of this lifestyle because he either cannot or refuses not to kick the habit of his addiction, and this can keep him in this level on the street. Secondly, the neglected can also end up in this sort of lifestyle simply because there's nobody to care for them. The youth who run away from a troubled home, the physically disabled person that can't work, or the mentally retarded person who nobody wanted all slipped through the cracks and ended up living on the street. And the poorly reintroduced can also fall into this kind of situation, usually, like I said earlier, because of an addiction. The second type is not quite as available to the public eye and is a little bit less desperate, but it is still homelessness as people in the second level are unable to take care of themselves. And in this level are people who are not sleeping on the streets, but more in shelters, women's shelters, charity housing, or possibly even in their cars. There are a lot of families that end up in this situation, although there are also a lot of individuals. And the 3 components that I find contribute more to this style of homelessness, I guess you could say, are those who have been abused, those who have fallen into the tragedy, and then once again those who have been neglected. These abused can end up in this situation when they run from the abuse to try to get out of that situation and end up in a place like a battered women's shelter or somewhere else. But they are still homeless because they are not able to provide for themselves and are living off of charity, which is the giving personal property or possessions to another person with the motivation of compassion. Children often end up in this sort of level of homelessness too by running with their mothers from an abusive relationship. The second component is tragedy, which I mentioned earlier. It's simply falling because you have no money because of some sort of natural disaster or foreclosure or tragedy. And these people end up living in their cars or shelter until enough is earned back to pay the debt or enough is earned to find more stable housing. But this is still homelessness, and it can take a very long time to get back on one's feet, especially when one's all-important credit in today's world has been destroyed. Finally, the neglected sometimes find their way to safe places such as these and are able to be taken care of. To go around to a definition that is a little more familiar to all of us, for the purposes of this speech, the church is defined as a group of people who follow the triune God, believe in Christ as their one and only Savior, and believe that the Bible is God-breathed. And Christians are people who seek to obey God's commands, follow and imitate the life that Jesus led, and also glorify God. And the church is called in Scripture to be salt and light to the world and to care for widows and orphans. She is to reach for the lost and lonely and the least of these and imitate how Christ treated people. In the Bible, her calling is to love her neighbor as herself, to defend the weak and fatherless and maintain the rights of the poor, and to be open-handed towards the poor and needy in her land. And it is also her calling to care about justice for the poor. Now, America is known as the land of the free. Yet, each and every day, Americans are walking or driving past those who are being choked by the questions of poverty. The National Coalition for the Homeless has a statistic which says that there are 3.5 million people every year in America sleeping on the street, eating out of trash cans, and going without their care strips. In a nation that is a world leader in technology, industry, and trading, one would think that we would not have such a problem with poverty in our streets. Why is there so much homelessness, and who's to blame? There's not frequent national disasters here, or rampant epidemics of disease, or tribal or civil warfare either. There's no shortage of food in America. On the contrary, many experts say that we're suffering from an epidemic of obesity. But in the lifeblood of our nation, in her cities, we find homelessness the most. Interwoven with tapestries of steel and structure, we find starvation and sorrow. Why is this, and who is responsible? It is not the government, so they are called to lead and rule, not care about the lost and lonely. It is not the economy, as even when the economy is doing as well as the proverbial kid on the first day of summer, which we all would like to do right now, we still have people sleeping under overpasses. And it's not the fault of any one race, as many races fall down that slippery slope of poverty. Who is responsible for the least of these, and who is neglecting that responsibility? Why is there so much homelessness, and what should we be doing about it? Through examination of first-hand accounts, statistics, and scripture, we will find the answer to all of these questions. Ladies and gentlemen, the church is responsible for all these treatments, and her either forgetfulness or neglect of the calling has contributed to the crisis of homelessness in America. The church, it seems, has become very uncomfortable with sin and associating with people who don't look nice or aren't clean. This may not be intentional, but it is seemingly to be a more and more common thing. If every person is created in the image of God, how is it that we have ceased to see the homeless people? According to one statistic, there are 224,457,000 Christians in the United States alone. In light of this statistic, I feel that the church could be doing a lot more and making a significant difference to the problem of homelessness. As I told you earlier, there are only 2.5 million homeless people in the United States, as opposed to the number of Christians that are discussing. Now, forgetting the poor is not a new phenomenon. I mean, it's partially human. We get involved in our own lives. We also we're just selfish. But hey, we're fallen. It happens. But we are still called to take care of the homeless. And with the resources and different statistics and help and counseling available to the church today, I feel that she could at least be doing more. The problem with homelessness is going to be a continual problem. I mean, Jesus even said, you will always have the poor with you. But with everything that's available to the church today, I feel that she could be doing more to help make a difference in the lives of those who are suffering from homelessness. And we're supposed to follow Jesus' example. Jesus wasn't deterred by people saying that he was hanging out with a bad crowd or people who maybe just smelled funny. And he didn't condemn people when he was feeding them, but rather gave them hope and love. He didn't just send a check to a mission. He went and ate with the people who needed him personally. Like the father who ran to the prodigal son, we're not supposed to wait behind the door while we wait for someone to kind of knock politely. But like that father, we're supposed to run out and embrace it, like the son, are still covered in their personal life. Now, if we examine the number of Christians versus the number of the homeless, if 1% of Christians were to decide that this homelessness is a problem and they personally were to do something about it, there would still be 5 Christians for every 1 homeless person in America. That's 1%. Imagine what could happen if 10, or 15, or 20% decided to do something. The church, as a body, is called to reach out to each of the 5 types of homeless persons. To use these people refuge to help them cope and counsel and get back on their feet. The addicted choose to bring freedom and love, but never condemnation. Why are we not supposed to be homeless people? Well, in the words of St. Augustine, saved by the grace of God, there go die. It's very important when we're working with people who are maybe in a lower station than us financially or otherwise, that we don't condemn them, but instead reach out to them in love. There's plenty of people in the world who will look at an addict and say, you're worthless. There are very few people in the world who will look at an addict and say, you're worth something. And this is the kind of thing they need here. Those who have suffered from a tragedy, it's the church's job to take them in and help them get back on their feet. Maybe take them alone or just take care of them, give them food. And then the neglected who are often children or the mentally and physically disabled, the church is to help their families, and this can help them cope and maybe not end up on the street. The neglected are in desperate need of love, and that should be the church's forte. Also, many churches are equipped with people who have experience in counseling or degrees in counseling or even a counseling ministry. And these people can be employed or engage the homeless population by helping them, especially the poorly introduced, the addicted, the neglected, pretty much all of them, by helping them get past those mental barriers into a normal lifestyle, as all of those things can have a significant effect upon a person, and even the experience of homelessness itself can have a very detrimental effect on a person's mental well-being. Now, what are we supposed to do about this problem of homelessness? It's obviously a problem, but what can we do as individuals to help rectify it? The first thing we need to do is change our view of the homeless. Some see the homeless as scary, others see them as just bums who won't work, and others still as an annoying little problem that when out of sight is out of mind. While this may not be on purpose, this is what needs to change. We have to stop long enough to look at another person and look at their problems to see that they're in need there and attempt to solve them. And Andy Granger said in his book, Love This, you see, Christian life is not about only stopping for people who are just in two-piece suits and singing hymns. The Christian life is about stopping and helping get people, going down people into in the hopes of helping get them out. We need to help see the need for physical and spiritual homelessness, and the easiest way to do this is by being informed. The second thing that we need to do to help change our view, and some people just are neglecting homelessness out of forgetfulness, others still are mocking the homeless. On several different occasions with several different groups of people, I have heard different people say, hey, let's play Stop the Hobo, or say, hey, look, bums, look down, or this general mockery of the homeless. And this shows exactly how deep our lack of empathy lies for those who have fallen into this situation. In Proverbs it says, he who mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker, and whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. We need to stop seeing them this way, not only for their benefit, but for our own. It's never good to tear down our fellow man to make ourselves look better, because as I said a moment ago, saved by the grace of God, that's all of us. And if we hadn't been redeemed by Jesus, we would all be drudges and drunkards or falling down into the slope of some sort of sin. By changing the way we view the homeless, whether it be accidental ignoring them or purposeful mocking, we can see and see other stuff to help them by changing our view. The second thing we need to do is act. James 2:15 says, suppose a brother or sister has got clothes or daily food. You say to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but there's nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith without action is dead. Mike Nicholas in his book Under the Overpass, A Journey of Faith on the Streets of America, and Andy Granger in his book Love This, both outline two different ways that we can help fight this problem. The first thing that they both suggest is that you find a need and you call a rescue mission and see what they need help with. Volunteer, go early, stay late, do what you need to do, and plug in and see how you can help. The second thing that the university suggested, which I found very interesting, was he suggests going down to a local rescue mission or wherever, and when people obviously are letting those information, going out and instead of serving in the kitchen or those places where they're feeding people, going out and talking to people who are standing in line and maybe handing out cheese bars or bags of chips or those sorts of things. What many people don't know is in order to get food at a place like a soup kitchen or some other mission, a homeless person will often spend several hours waiting and possibly even still be turned away if they're out of food or it's time to do something else or whatever. So by going out and talking to these people, you can give them some human interaction and maybe a snack that will help them be sustained until they can actually get a meal. In my university's experience also as a homeless person who's some research in this area, one of the biggest things you can do for someone who's often told, get lost, we don't want you here, we have a policy, you need to leave, etc. One of the biggest things you can do for them is just spend a little bit of genuine time caring on them and show them that they're people and that they deserve to be loved. Another idea that the university has is to go downtown with a group of friends and go out and buy Chinese takeout or coffee or even just a bag of McDonald's with the purpose of going out and finding someone who is homeless or in one of these situations and feeding them and just sitting there and talking to them. While steps like this may not solve an addiction or buy a house, they show Christ's love to people and feed physical and spiritual needs. Jesus didn't hand out car keys and house keys. He went to people and helped see their needs and bless them. Another thing that can be a big factor in helping us to help the homeless is just seeing them. In some places like Atlanta, it's very easy to see the homeless. You turn around and there's 5 or 6 homeless. Another thing that they both suggest is contacting a local organization such as a rescue mission or a closed closet or something like it. Find out if they need help in winter and how to clothing drive. In the summer it might be as simple as filling up the truck with cases of bottled water and handing them out to the homeless so that they can stay hydrated. A local Boy Scout, a Cardinal boy, actually recently did something like this for a project. He called the local rescue mission and found out that they needed towels. While seemingly an odd request, that was what they needed, so he raised money and bought towels to help support this mission. And simple things like this can be done by everyday people as seen by this young man and are not that hard to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of work to buy a couple of extra towels next time there's a store to do what you need. Another thing that a person can do that's probably the hardest thing and the most uncomfortable for you as an individual to do is reach out to a particular person who is homeless. Maybe take them to a restaurant, buy a burger, talk to them for half an hour. This may be very uncomfortable for you, but it can have a huge impact on this person, and maybe even lead them to ask, why are you doing this? Why do you care about me in my life? At which point you can tell them about the way that you were rescued from the issue of your sin, and how you have been redeemed and saved, and given new life, and help them to see that the only reason that you are doing this is because you are trying to reflect the love that you've received to them. And while these things may be simple, having a conversation, these simple acts of love can change a person's life both here and in eternity. Now, it is true that not every homeless person is willing to work through his problems to get back to normal lifestyle, or it is true that there are people out there who understand me, but I feel that it's better to be too giving than not giving enough, if there are people out there who are genuinely homeless and do need help. You have to be careful when working with the homeless because they are, after all, still people, and there are people in desperate situations, and as we all know, people sin. But it doesn't mean that we go out and have our guards up and bodyguards and all that, and people do sin, but if you use simple caution, you should be alright. A good example of this that I personally witnessed when we were on our mission trip to Atlanta Our group of 4 or 5 people was walking down to our next mission, and the homeless gentleman asked us if we would stop and pray with him. And of course, we were willing to go on. He said, "Sure, we'll pray with you." And while the rest of us closed our eyes and bowed our heads, Andrew stayed there with his eyes open, making sure the man was going to come and jump us or whatever. It didn't even occur to me. But thankfully, he demonstrated the kind of caution that is good to use when working with the homeless. We still need to keep them on people. We still need to love them, but it is good to be careful. And my conclusion said in regards to giving to the homeless, there aren't really easy answers to the question of giving. On the one hand, we're called to help those in need. On the other, we're called to be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. Being as wise and innocent might mean taking some risks, getting creative, and forgiving yourself if you feel foolish or make mistakes. Jesus gave to people that he knew were still going to go the wrong way and not follow him. And so it's not people's actions that necessarily make them deserving of our help and love, but rather the fact that they are human and made in the image of God. Second, I'm not saying at all that there are no Christians working on this problem. On the contrary, there are many Christians who have a great heart for the homeless and are donating countless hours to working on this problem. But unfortunately, it seems that this is the minority in the church rather than the majority, and this is what needs to change. Some might feel like they would not be helpful if just one person is going out and trying to do something. A lot of times, one person can't save the world. But I think that any person's efforts can be useful, even if they're just to help one other person on the planet. It's still useful. And some may say, well, I don't have the gifts to help with the homeless. I don't know anything about counseling. How can I do anything? But in many places, like clothes closets or soup kitchens, all they really need is someone to wash dishes or clothes. And I'm pretty sure that every person in this room can wash dishes. So you don't necessarily have to have a particular skill set that's advanced or go to school or help the homeless, whatever. You can do simple stuff like this and make an impact. In addition to this, some might feel that it's not their gift going out and talking to people or ministering to people, but I believe that every kind of spiritual gift can be used to minister to the homeless. Those who are gifted in teaching can go out and help educate the homeless in both life skills and in about the gospel. Those who have the gift of discernment can help see what area of need needs to be addressed first. Those who have the gift of leadership can help organize efforts within and outside the church. And those who have the gift of mercy can listen and be there for the homeless. And these are just a few examples of how the body of Christ can come together to make a difference in this problem. The third thing is that I'm not saying that no other organization can work on the problem of homelessness. On the contrary, I think that any collaboration is a good thing because this is the problem that needs to be addressed. I am saying, however, that if the church was executing her calling correctly, there wouldn't be a need for other organizations. An unfortunate example of just how this kind of thing plays out is that in Memphis, we have a women's shelter that is run by these wonderful women who have come from Mother Teresa's orders in India to serve this Memphis shelter. Now, the number of Christians in Memphis, just Memphis, you would think we wouldn't have to import people to take care of our downtrodden neighbors. And this is just an example of how this kind of thing is becoming all too common. I also personally believe that welfare would not have come to its present state if the church had previously been doing her job more effectively. The government shouldn't have to tax us into caring for our neighbors. We should do it out of love. I also have no problem with Christians working in non-religious organizations or other such organizations. The motivation here is to spread the love of Jesus, and the vehicle by which that is spread, as long as it's not immoral, is irrelevant. So, like the young man, we were all once stuck in a ditch, covered in our own inadequacies, failures, and sins. We once were lost, but now we're found, because Jesus left his glory to come down into our dirty ditch of a world and lift us up. We've been rescued, and we're told to do likewise and help other people in the world. we're supposed to go down and help heal disease that this world has put upon people like those who are homeless. And one song that is near and dear to my heart puts it, they will know we are Christians by our love. It doesn't say they'll know we're Christians by how sinless our lives are. It doesn't say they'll know we're Christians by how big our church building is, or even they'll know we're Christians by the great things we accomplish. It says they'll know we're Christians by our love. That love can be shown through taking the time to die for our own agendas and stopping to see the needs of others, and after seeing them, doing something about those needs. Perhaps dying to self is as simple as buying a cup of coffee, or as hard as overcoming our greatest fears. Perhaps we go out and stop for a moment and love these things and change our view of them. As you go about your life today, and the next time you're maybe in an urban area and see someone who is homeless, I challenge you to reflect on your own salvation and how you as a redeemed before God of the ditch. And also, I hope that you will reflect on these words in Matthew, which read as follows. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom which has been prepared to you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." And the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and invite you in, or visit you?" And the king will reply, "I tell you the truth. Whatever you did to the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Thank you very much.
All right, got a few minutes for questions.
Hope I won't spill it all over myself. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, thank you, ma'am. This is final.
The Bible says that Jesus said there will always be hungry, there will always be poor. Why do you think he makes a point to mention that?
I think you make a point to mention it in that it's always going to be a problem that we need to address as Christians. And in the passage that talks about that, people are saying, with the woman that came and washed or poured incense on her feet, she should have spent this on the poor and all of that. And he's saying that to show that she did a good thing by glorifying him. And I think he says that we're always going to have the poor with us, not as we need to just brush this off, the problem is not going to go away, but rather as something that we're always going to need to address and be aware of. And so the fact is, yes, there are always going to be people who are poor, but because of that, it's always our challenge and our job to take care of them. Mr. Black.
Lexie, I did something I spent a lot of time thinking about too, because I live near Midtown, and there's actually a lot of homeless in my neighborhood, and it's really in the shopping center particularly. And so I feel like they, mainly because I'm coming from work, they hit me up a lot because I'm dressed nicer than the average person, I guess, and so they tend to think I have money. And I've really got to the point where I've got to come up with some kind of strategy on there. And I guess my question is really, like, I've asked a bunch of people this. Sometimes you'll run into people who have mental problems or are con artists. And then you run into people who really need help. And they're trying to get help and can't find it. I mean, what would you suggest be my strategy there? Or what did you come up with as far as any way to deal with panhandling?
With panhandlers, I didn't come up with necessarily like one size fits all sort of answer to that question, because like you said, it can have a lot of different people who are panhandling. Maybe they actually have mental problems, maybe they are really homeless, or maybe they're scam artists. And with that, I kind of took a word from my student who actually has worked for, I think, 6 months as a homeless person, and says that, you know, a lot of it depends on just following the Spirit and then being discerning, looking at, okay, you've got a Rolex watch, obviously you're not being homeless, those kinds of things. I know it's not as obvious as that, but a lot of times discernment goes into it. And then also, I think you can say no, but still be nice to the person as opposed to just ignoring them and being rude to them, or say, hey, can I go buy you a burger at McDonald's, or something like that, as opposed to just giving money, because a lot of times people can use their money that is given to them to feed an addiction. So, trying to meet their physical needs, maybe suggesting somewhere where they can go to get help, and just being nice can help a lot. And does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, but let me ask you this, because there's a big campaign downtown we see your money won't help them. And also added this, I remember asking a friend of mine who does inner city ministry, and she told me, you got to be careful buying food or gas too, because they know it's suicide. And that to me kind of very sinister, but she said, you know, really there can be a problem with people selling things. Like there is a way to get money out of this because of illicit things. And I honestly, like part of me doesn't want to believe that, but another part of me thinks if I were, you know, down to that last option, that may be something that I do.
Well, one way that you can, I guess, avoid that whole thing of them taking the stuff you give them and going and selling it or whatever is maybe instead of just dropping off the burger, sitting there and talking to them, listening to them while they're eating it. And then you can kind of see, okay, are you really eating the burger? Are you really hungry? Or are you trying to take my money? So I guess by adding a little bit of extra time, you can kind of ensure that your money is going where it's supposed to be. Does that answer the question? Yes.
How would you resolve the problem about people who are really not homeless and they just want to get more money, and about the people who really are homeless and need money?
Kind of like what I told Mr. Black, it's really important to be discerning. And for all of y'all who are fourth graders, I don't suggest that y'all necessarily go out and try to help the homeless yourself. You can go with your parents and help wash dishes or whatever, but for y'all personally right now, I'm not suggesting that y'all go out and necessarily talk to the homeless or give them money or whatever, just because y'all are children and that's not really safe. But with that whole thing, it's good to be discerning and look at them and maybe listen to them and talk to them a while. You can kind of tell, okay, is somebody making this up or is this really what happened? And then maybe trying to meet their physical needs but staying with them long enough to see that it's actually met can help. Is that a good question?
Lexie, how do you avoid patronizing folks who are homeless? Because it seems to me that if I went downtown, let's just say I was going to go to a Redbird game, and accounted for the fact that I might run into someone who's homeless, therefore maybe I should be intentional about getting there a little early so that I can do something good for a person and catch the ball game. But even if I did that, it seems like my sort of shotgun approach at buying a cup of coffee or a burger for someone and sitting down with them for a while comes off a little disingenuous, as if I'm doing this because I feel like I have to, or why does this guy care if I care about him or not? When frankly, am I going to be there tomorrow? Am I going to be there the next day? Am I going to really do something to help him other than feed him for a few minutes? So do you have any thoughts on how we might really help folks without just using them as an excuse to make ourselves feel better about actually doing something?
Yes, sir. And with my paper, I said this in my paper, but I just stopped in my speech. We're not supposed to be guilted into serving people. We are supposed to be motivated by love, like Jesus. And I don't intend to guilt people, but rather show us what our calling is and remind us about how that love has changed our life. But with what you're saying, one way to avoid, I guess, what you're saying is like patronizing them and enabling their lifestyle kind of by feeding them and being there for a few minutes and being like, okay, see you later, is to invest in some sort of organization on a consistent basis, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's twice a month, however long, and you'll start seeing the same people. And even when we were in Atlanta, Mrs. Carell was very good about being outgoing to people and walking around the city. We saw the same guy 2 times, and she always talked to him. And so that kind of thing, when you're involved in an organization for an extended period of time, you will start to get to know people and maybe have a more personal impact. And then also, by bringing those people into the church and maybe offering counseling ministries, maybe offering, a nice Sunday meal in the afternoon, whatever, you can also have more personal relationships with them and help them personally get out of it. So I guess it takes a lot of time. It's not necessarily an easy, quick fix, okay, I'm going to change your life and be personal at the same time and also go check my ball game. I mean, it is something that you have to decide to commit to as an important thing that's going to take time and investment. But there are definitely ways to help with the problems that are outside of buying a burger and all of those things, and those are kind of just an easy quick fix that maybe alleviate your conscience or whatever. But those sorts of actions should hopefully lead to these bigger commitments, like going down to the soup kitchen once a week and washing dishes or handing out soup or any sort of those kind of things. Yes, sir.
Well, what if you, say you go up to a homeless man, you know he's really hungry, he's not a comment or anything, you know for a fact, you buy him food, maybe a drink or something, and then you help him get to a place that will, give him food and give him a place to stay, but later you find out that they turn him down and, won't let him in, and you see him on the streets again, what would you do then?
Probably go over and talk to them again and try and say, hey, how's your wife doing? How's, your dog Jim or, your friend who's down the street? You just talk to them for a while and be like, hey, I'm really sorry that happened. I hope you'll try again, or if you have another place you can maybe try to go to, or what can I personally do to help you right now? And that's more of that building of a relationship, because there are a lot of homeless organizations, but there's not enough to serve everybody. And sometimes people do get turned down, maybe because of an addiction, maybe because they dropped out of the program, whatever. It does happen where people don't stay in these programs, but by continuing that personal relationship that you've already established, you can further hopefully help them out.
All right, thank you.